the right foundation is harder than ever. Il Makiage makes it easy to find your perfect match online. No store required. With 50 shades of flawless coverage and over 60,000 5-star reviews, the hype is real. Their online quiz uses AI to find your ideal shade in seconds. And with Try Before You Buy, you can try your full-size shade at home free for 14 days. Take the quiz at ilmakiage.com/quiz. ILMAKIAGE.com/quiz.
Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. Welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. I'm joined as always, Keith Sargent, James Cratch. A depressing week in college football history. Unprecedented week in college football history, fellas. No Big Ten, no Pac-12 this fall. I was thinking about this, Sargent. I think you were there with me, or at least this is my memory of it. It was a long time ago. But we were someplace in March, and we were talking about what this meant for the college basketball season. And I can't remember who said it or what put the idea in my head, but at the time it was, well, what about college football? I mean, this could impact the college football season. And my thought then was, oh, come on, that is so far off. Kids, we'll figure something out before September. But here we are. The country didn't figure out the coronavirus, COVID-19. I mean, and this is what happens. This is the reality we're facing. So, Sarge, tell me, when you heard this news, I mean, just from the emotional standpoint of what it means to Rutgers, what it means to the Big Ten, what it means to the country. I mean, what was your first thought?
Yeah, I think it goes back. You're right. I mean, back to March when the first coronavirus cases came. The first person died. I think March 6th. In the state. Flash forward 5 months, we haven't really gotten our hands around. Medical experts haven't really come to grips with like the long-term effects of this virus. There's certain things that we do know that is obviously highly contagious. It has resulted in a lot of deaths. The data suggests that people under the age of 50 aren't really dying at a high rate. However, there's more to this than just dying, right? I mean, I think the long-term effects on the lungs, on the brain, on the heart that we're finding out, there's just not a lot of positive long-term data that we're finding out, especially in the last couple of weeks, where we found out that the inflammation around the heart, can cause, that has been shown to have been in a number of Big Ten athletes, according to multiple reports. Inflammation around the heart leads to sudden cardiac arrest. We've seen, players, in various sports, various levels die of sudden cardiac arrest. That was probably the one thing that kind of tipped the scales. All along, I thought it was going to be a difficult decision from the emotional standpoint. Like you said, is so ingrained in our culture. Coaches, players, you saw them coming out hard over the last couple of days saying that they wanted to play. Obviously, the financial impact, we could talk about that, more in depth, but you have to understand that, this is $1 billion industry. There's not one czar of college football that's sitting in his mansion collecting all those gold coins. That money is being spread across the board to administrative salaries, to coaching salaries, to we're talking livelihoods. We're talking, the nighttime janitor at the rack who makes, $30,000. We're talking about the ticket takers and the beer salesmen that rely on $7,500, every fall, for 20 years, because of college football. So we're talking about all these different livelihoods that are impacted by it. Was certainly not an easy decision.
Cratch, for me, just when they couldn't even get on the practice field, I was hopeful in the spring. I even thought going into the summer, even when the numbers were spiking, all right, let's see what happens here. But, Rutgers did everything right by all accounts, right? They had the most testing. They had the best testing, the fastest results. You have a task-minded coach and Greg Schiano, and they couldn't even physically get the team on the field. What was the tipping point for you? And was there a moment when you thought, all right, well, this is just not going to happen?
It was the Rutgers outbreak.
Yeah.
The whole time, I know we did the podcast a couple weeks ago, and you guys were very pessimistic, and I was at 50-50. I was the optimistic one of the group. It was just because of inertia. I just thought that no one was going to stop these schools from trying to play football. June came and they had workouts, and it seemed like even if there was a stoppage here or there, Maryland. I think when Maryland announced they were stopping workouts, they had under sub 5% positivity, and it just seemed like they kept on putting one foot in front of the other. And I thought that before we knew it, it was going to be September, and holy heck, they're playing a football game. I just thought they were going to kind of stumble into it. But once Rutgers had its situation, and the mother of the Indiana player, which I think is the biggest impact, comes out, I just think at that point I was like, you know what? They might not be able to thread this needle, and they might not even want to try to thread the needle. And I do think that everyone is flipping out, how did the Big Ten release a schedule on Wednesday and then they cancel on Tuesday? I think it's very simple. The presidents and chancellors finally got involved and paid attention to what was going on.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And they made the call. Yeah. And that's what happened. Everyone can rip. Kevin Warren didn't cancel the Big Ten football season. Kevin Warren is basically the Big Ten's Roger Goodell now. He's a human shield for the 14 owners, CEOs, presidents, chancellors in the room that made the decision. That's what happened. I mean, the ADs had to put a schedule out because they have to proceed as if they're going to play a season. I just think that the Rutgers situation, the fact that Northwestern had to shut the whole program down basically for a false negative, and the Indiana mom going on Facebook, I just think the presidents and chancellors finally said, oh, wait a second, we've got football players on our campuses. We should look into this. Right. And they did, and now it's over.
And now we have what I think is going to be just a fascinating story that will unfold over the next, few weeks or months, because just like everything in this country right now, we are in a blue state, red state divide with college football. I mean, the SEC forging ahead, going from probably dragging the ACC with them toward what you were just talking about, trudging toward September and football games, and just the single-minded, Clay Travis insanity about playing college football during this pandemic. Now I just wonder, Sarge, and you talk about this a little bit, do you think there is a chance we will be sitting here in October where we have the two or three of the Power 5 leagues still playing while the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are on the sideline? I mean, is that really going to happen? Is that where we're headed?
A chance, yes. Will it happen? My gut tells me no. And I'm just going to point out that, again, the Pac-12 put out a medical report, after they, announced their decision. I'm just going to quote from it, one line. There is new evolving information regarding potential serious cardiac side effects in elite athletes. We do not have enough information to understand the short and long-term outcomes regarding these health issues.
Yeah,
how? And I know there's varying medical reports in anything. If you think you have cancer, you're going to get second opinion. You're going to get a third opinion. I get that. But how can any league other than the NFL, which has pro athletes who have collectively bargained rights to opt out and still get paid, how is any league in the football league in the country going to be able to proceed with that hanging out there from the Pac-12?
It's probably hard. It's hard to answer, but football to that, right? I mean, it's hard to come. There's no good comeback for that one, Cratch. And as I'm thinking about it now, the fact that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 did this, now the SEC is going to have to answer, well, what's different about you, right? Well, I mean, now the precedent's been set.
I will say this, and obviously I'm a graduate of an SEC institution, not that there's anything to do with it. The SEC, I think, at least has a leg to stand on in the sense that they have basically said, we're not going to play football until September 26th. We're going to bring our students back to campus. We're going to see what happens. They at least have a plan.
But we know what's going to happen, though.
Right? We know what's going to happen, but at least they they have some logic to what they're thinking. I understand why the SEC didn't cancel football on Tuesday, because they can say, look, this is a long-term thing. We're not saying it's going to happen. We're going to try it. But the ACC, which is going to kick off Labor Day weekend, and the Big 12, which basically is you could play in August and not play against they're just a mess. They're the two leagues that have a tough – and now it's I was thinking about this. Let's say they do play. are they going to rig the college football playoff, assuming we still have one, to give one of the group of five, the highest ranked group of five team, an automatic bid to basically extort the American, the Sun Belt, and the Conference USA into like going along with this and like giving them added cover?
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, they would love it. They would certainly love it.
Let me just weigh in one more, and Cratch is exactly right on that. But it boils down to the SEC, if they are able to do it, or the Big 12, or the ACC, or even the NFL. It boils down to money, right? Finances, yeah. And the reason why I say that is because testing, and it's not just the testing of the coronavirus, which is going to be multiple times a week, which at Rutgers, according to sources I've been told, they were estimating between $3 and $5 million on testing alone at Rutgers. Now, obviously, that's we're going to be very prohibitive for most of the non-Power 5 conferences, which is one of the reasons why I think the MAC decided to pull out. But it goes more than that now. So now with the cardiac stuff, an EKG and the heart testing that they need to do is, according to Dr. Martinez, who I quoted, he's a Morristown based cardiologist who's obviously been quoted in a lot of other media outlets, this past week with regards to the inflammation around the heart. $500 a pop for one of those tests, just one of them. So just do simple math, right? Rutgers had 30 players diagnosed, could be more now. 30 times 500 is $15,000. And you're going to have to do multiple amounts of those tests. And LSU, Clemson, they already had high amounts of spread. If they continue to play on this path, everyone conceives that there are going to be players who come down with this. So now you have to add another wrinkle in addition to the $3 to $5 million in sheer testing that you're going to do. You're going to do more cardiac. So everyone talks about the liability that if a kid does die from it, of course, that's going to be a huge amount of money, the morality of it. But just preventing this cardiac sudden cardiac arrest, we're talking about millions of dollars more in testing alone.
Yep. Well, and Sarge, Rutgers is estimating $3 to $5 million for a test that they made, that they own, that they create on their campus. Imagine if you're someone else that doesn't, you're not a major research institution and you've got to go get the test on the market.
But fellas, these guys a lot of these places aren't testing. That's like the dirty little secret. And that is a good transition to one of those places that's not testing. And based on all accounts, Nebraska. And I mean, look, we've been waiting to talk about this, and it's just, to me, it's just an amazing development within the Big Ten. That sorry, I think you were with me, or maybe it was Don. I forget who. With our first trip out there, we were just dumbstruck about how nice everyone in Nebraska was, and apparently that is true until you talk about taking away their football. Because it's just been an incredible dumpster fire in Lincoln. The media it's embarrassed themselves with some of the things they've written. I'm going to read you a line from one column that actually appeared. This is what someone in Nebraska wrote. And it's a quote, starts with quote, "What if a player dies? A longtime Nebraska football fan asked me last week. What if a city dies? I replied, in reference to the remarkable ramifications for Lincoln and the state if there's no college football in 2020. I just can't believe that some of this stuff has appeared out there. The idea that they were going to go rogue, play their own schedule, join the Big 12, recruit North Dakota State. Just this crazy stuff. And it's just, Cratch, I know you've been marveling from it afar as well. What do you think's going to happen with that? Are they just going to shut up and get in line?
I would assume so, because so I think there's a couple issues. One is that Bill Moos, the Nebraska athletic director, is kind of considered like the wild man of the AD pack in the Big Ten. He for everything he said the last few weeks, he seems detached from reality. When they went to a conference-only schedule, he was saying, let's play a 12-game Big Ten-only schedule. There wouldn't be teams left standing at the end of that. It's physically insane to play the entire conference. Two, he said, we're hoping to have full attendance in Memorial Stadium. It's 86,000 people.
It's incredible.
And you're at the time he said it, the state had Nebraska had the fourth highest effective reproduction rate in the country. They were at 8-9% positivity rate in testing. He's like, well, we're healthy here. I'm like,
right.
No, you're not. I mean, so, and this whole thing, we're going to go rogue, and it's just like here's the thing. Like a lot of coaches, Harbaugh, Ryan Day, James Franklin, they spoke out, save the season. I think that's a little bit of it was with Franklin and Harbaugh. It was clearly posturing for defend your players and for recruiting, which I understand because the minute the result happened, Michigan and Penn State immediately fell in line. I think with Ohio State, they clearly wanted to wait a little bit longer. I think they tried to throw their weight around, but once they realized that wasn't going to work, they fell in with the pack, and now they're looking forward to spring football. But Nebraska, I think it would be insane for them to leave the Big Ten. Honestly, if they want to leave the Big Ten, I don't think the Big Ten would really care all that much. They'll just, there's going to be a long line of schools who want to join the Big Ten. Nebraska, they talk about how much they're losing economically. I'm sure you're going to pay a massive penalty to leave the Big Ten. And if you go back to the Big 12, you basically Texas owns your soul at that point too. You're not going to get as much TV money for a while, and you're never going to get as much TV money as the Big Ten is, even if these contracts go up once we get back to playing. And the third thing is this whole independent schedule. One, I don't even know if there's anyone to play, but two, if there are teams to play, I would be stunned if Nebraska – I could totally see Nebraska if we're going rogue, we're playing independent schedule. And then North Dakota State calls up and says, hey, we'll play you. No. Army, hey, come play at Mikey Stadium, the safest place in America to play a football game. I'm sure Nebraska will find a reason to not go play them. Can't play the triple option. So I just think it's beer muscles. It's come at me, bro, in the bar, basically.
That's exactly what it is. And Sarge, it's great. People talk about, and it's been a long-term thing, like the Big Ten made a mistake adding Rutgers. Well, let's just say, I get it. I get what Nebraska is. I understand. They have not been a dominant football program. They've given nothing to the league as far as market goes or prestige university wise goes. They're the one team now, I believe, without the accreditation that the rest of the league has. I mean, go ahead. We're all kicking Nebraska. It's your turn, Sarge. Go ahead. Tell us you hate corn. Tell me something else to get me angrier about Nebraska, please.
Well, I think our beloved former colleague, Ryan Dunleavy, and you were there, I think, when we were at, and we talked to Julie Herman, who was a Nebraska alum, and no comment there.
Nebraska. Yep.
Yeah, no comment there. But she, before our trip, our first trip out to Lincoln, she was raving about the pizza in Nebraska.
Oh, there it is. Yes.
It was... And she said, you got to try it. It's like nothing you've ever tried. And we're like, okay, we'll try it. And then we're going to eat there that Saturday night. But as luck had it, it was actually in the press box, the place that Julie recommended. And we get online and try some Nebraska pizza. And Ryan takes a bite of it in the line. Now, I don't want to have this image, with everything that we're going through with germs and coronavirus. This is not an image that you really want in your head. Certainly not something that you want to do in 2020. But he's online, takes a bite of the pizza, and is so repulsed by it, spits it out into the garbage can.
Into the garbage. All these nice Midwestern people are looking at him. I mean, it really was. It was quite a moment.
Yeah. It was a sight to behold. But it had some sort of mustard. It had some sort of sauce, mustard, mayonnaise, something in there that just was not good.
It does not belong on pizza. Yeah.
Yeah, it was difficult. But again, we could talk. Kratch hit on all the points. I will say, from the financial standpoint, Nebraska had no problem, cashing in the $55 million check from the Big Ten for TV revenue. They would have had $40 million from the Big 12, mind you. So they had no problem cashing the $55 million, on July 1st. So ultimately,
I will add this, if you're surprised by this, just remind yourself, this is a team, a school that in the last 17 years has fired 2 head football coaches who had career 700 or better winning percentages when they were fired.
Yeah.
They're a little bit delusional.
What's one dead kid in the grand scheme of things if it helps Nebraska football? Good God, what a crazy place. All right, let's move on to spring ball, and this is obviously what matters now. There are 2 things about this that's fascinating, guys. Number one, the new Rutgers president was on the radio talking about this, which of course is in itself would have been an entire podcast topic, that we now have a president at Rutgers who's comfortable enough talking about athletics to go on NPR for 6 minutes and talk about the future of what's going on with college football. That to me means A, that Rutgers is in a better place long term, and B, he was probably really engaged in these conversations that led to what happened here. That said, in this conversation with NPR, Holloway mentioned that he was very bullish on spring football, which surprised me because everything you've read so far about spring football has been the opposite. Urban Meyer, Barry Alvarez, all these guys are saying, well, I don't think it's going to work. In Kratch, you have your own idea of how to put this season together. Do you think that spring football is really a viable thing
I think it's
forward?
a viable thing going forward if the league is realistic about what it can do in the spring. And I think it's the virus, So we know that obviously the Big Ten is going to allow these players, these teams to stay on campus and have their 20 hours a week of football activities, training, lifting, all that. So if somehow we start to beat this thing back finally, and we get to Thanksgiving, maybe the Big Ten can say, okay, we're going to start training camp in December, and we're going to try to start this season in January or mid-January, early February. I think that kind of has to be the cutoff point. I think you need to be on the field at least by the Saturday before the Super Bowl is supposed to be played. Now, I know people will say the weather's horrible. I do think that baseball goes to Florida and Arizona for a couple weeks at the beginning of the year. It's entirely possible that the entire Big Ten might be going to Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Detroit, and playing, doubleheader weekends in the Dome if the weather is too bad in some parts of the country to get going. But I think you play 6 games, play your division games, maybe have a conference championship game, a very limited amount of bowl games. I mean, let's just assume that, let's say the Big 12 and the SEC and the Pac-12, the ACC, they either play their season or it starts and it's a complete disaster, but they're not going to play in the spring. All you need to do is have the Big Ten champion play the Pac-12 champion if they play in the spring in the Rose Bowl with quotation marks. Maybe the Big Ten sends a team to play the MAC champion. So basically you're done by mid-April. And then you have May, June, July, August to rest. You start training camp at the end of August. You kick off the last week of September. You play a 10-game regular season. You're back to normal.
What do you think, Sarge?
I agree. I think you might even push the calendar a little bit back further. From what my understanding was, you bring the athletes back January 18th. I guess that would be like your normal winter break, return. And, you have a 4 or 5 week training camp. You start the last weekend in February 27th. You play 6 games over 7 weeks. That gets you the first week of April. And then you play a Big Ten championship. Keep in mind, there's not going to be a college football championship. But then after, the Big Ten championship, which you can make some revenue on that, then you just, play your bowls with whichever conferences, if we're talking, at that point where the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 all decided to play during the fall, then they're out. But then, the Mountain West and the MAC and the Pac-12, the conferences that decide to go forward with spring, you could just play bowl games with them. You could, still play the Rose Bowl between the Pac-12 champion and the Big 12 champion, Big 10 champion. So ultimately, I agree. The wear and tear is going to be the biggest issue. The possibility of playing 15 games in the fall, and 6 or 8 games during the spring. Big time challenge. But Kratch is right. I think you have to be forward thinking as far as changing up fall of 2021 as well.
Yeah, I guess that, and we'll get to the Rutgers Insider questions in a minute. But that is one point that a really good point that one of our subscribers made was that I'd rather have one normal 2021 season than 2 gimmicky half-ass baked, Yeah. And I just wonder why sacrifice if you're not, you might never get it done in the spring,
Well, here's why. So here's why. And this is what I was told early on. And the question of finances. If the doomsday scenario is not having a college football season in fiscal year 2021.
Right.
And we're talking about the TV money and potentially the ticket money. We're talking, again, that's where we're talking about the doomsday scenario of not having it. The Pac-12, there was a report that came out about, a bridge loan where they go to the banks and they try to make programs as whole as possible, with a loan you had to pay back over 10 years. Rutgers is familiar with the loan process. They've taken out these in the past. There's been I asked over the last 24 hours whether or not the Big Ten got that. I know it was something that I reported about a month ago as a possibility, but unless they get some sort of financial security from whether it's a loan or the TV network saying we're gonna make it as whole as possible, it's very important to play college football in fiscal year 2021 for these schools.
Right.
I will also add this. I've heard from some people that, there might be a lot of money in spring football. Giving ESPN a real life Big Ten football season, even if it's on a smaller scale, after the Super Bowl is like the equivalent of NBC page at 30 Rock in the basement, discovering like a lost season of Friends and a lost season of Seinfeld that no one, that we could put on TV all of a sudden. It's like, they would much rather play, Ohio State, Michigan than Knicks Magic in NBA regular season games. So I think this could be something that there's a lot of hurdles to it, and I think that they're prepared to not play in the spring. They realize it's going to be a challenge. But if ESPN is now flashing even more money to play it, I think they're going to find a way.
All right, let's do a quick true or false and then get to the insider questions. Gentlemen, you know how true or false works. I won't give you the details. Here we go. First one, true or false? This is good news for Greg Schiano. Sarge, true or false?
True.
False.
Cratch?
False.
Wow, come back to that one. I'm going to go true. Okay, next one, true or false? You think this is bad for football? Forget a basketball season. Sarge, true or false?
False.
False.
Cratch?
False.
All right. True or false? Layoffs are coming to Rutgers. Lots of them. Sarge, athletic department taking a hit. True or false?
True.
Cratch?
I'll say true. I think it's a little bit too early, though.
It is early.
True or false? Schiano will turn over a quarter of this roster before Rutgers plays again. Sarge, true or false?
True.
Cratch?
True.
Yeah, we have no idea what that's going to look like. The Big Ten has a commissioner problem. Sarge, true or false?
False.
False.
I'm going to go true just because of, well, we'll talk about it, but I think there's evidence that people don't have confidence in him. True or false? Kyle Flood, Clay Travis is a match made in hell. Sarge, true or false?
True. I did stir the pot. I mean, I did put it in your head 2 days ago when I saw those tweets.
Several people did. The other, you know what happened? It's kind of like, like off the hook answer and congrats. This to the other podcast. So I'm sitting there winding down last night after a really long day, and I get a text from Mike Vorkanoff, the host of the I don't know. There's so many podcasts.
Are You Screw?
Are You Screw? Yeah. And he says to me, "Did you see this? You've got Kyle Flood, celebrating and amplifying tweets from Clay Travis, who of course is responsible for attempting to destroy the career of the man who gave Kyle Flood every single thing in coaching, Greg Schiano." And I saw it and I just couldn't help myself. Anyway, we don't have to discuss that one, but I mean, good grief, people, get a grip. All right. So you actually do not think this is good news for Greg Schiano, Cratch. Explain.
So here's the thing. Like, I totally understand that they were going to go 1-9 at best if they had played this Big Ten only schedule. And the fans were like, I see 4 wins. I'm like, you're just about as loopy as the Nebraska folks right now. I mean, they were not going to win many football games, if any. But that being said, I just don't think that Greg can just recruit his way out of this. And in 2021, like it's been fixed just out of recruiting. I think there's a lot of young players on that team from the last couple of recruiting cycles under Ash that either have to play and get better and kind of provide a backbone, a foundation that Greg can kind of build on until it's entirely his team, or they've got to see the writing on the wall and move on to other things so that Greg can free up more space on the roster to bring his, transfer portal guys in. That's my issue. I think this team has to play and get better, or play and figure out who can help it so they can make more additions. The bottom line is now, whether it's in the spring or fall of 2021, they don't have a proven quarterback. Still they don't know what that is. I just think that's the issue, that they needed to play and improve, and that you can't just strictly recruit your way out of this hole that this program has built.
Right. You both think there's going to be a basketball season? I'm just not as sure, because if you're at the point now where you're not going to play essentially in front of fans without a vaccine, I think that's what we're saying. How in the world do you have an indoor sport? I mean, that basketball, you would think that rate of transmission, the way you're on top of each other, would be worse than football. Sarge, why do you think they're going to play basketball?
Here's why: less numbers. Your football, you're talking about 100 and something players. Basketball is just less numbers, so the testing isn't as prohibitive. And I think ultimately travel is going to be tough. I mean, travel, we've all talked about the travel, but ultimately, I think it's going to be condensed mightily. Again, conference only season for most of these leagues, and I think it's going to be too tough to not have a March Madness. So I think it's going to be a season unlike we've ever seen. But I think ultimately they're going to do everything they can. And when you do talk about bubble, I think the bubble potential is not for the regular season, but certainly for March Madness.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, you can bubble March Madness as in terms of travel. You can Steve Peichel could put his basketball team on a plane at 8 a.m. They could fly to Purdue. They could play at a 1 p.m. Eastern tip-off, and they could you can literally fly, bus to the arena, play the game, get on the bus, go back to the airport, fly back home. And I think you could send 6 teams to a central site for 10 days and play a bunch of games every other day and knock them out that way. I think they're going to find a way to play hoops. It might be a 15-game regular season and you go right into the conference tournament, but I do think you can find a way. It's a lot more nimble than football.
I think you're both missing the point that they canceled the football season because of what they didn't know about COVID. So if we don't know more in 5 months
that's
about
true.
it, that to me is it's not about whether or not they can get to Nebraska. It's about whether or not this disease can really affect them.
But Steve, but speaking again, I'm talking about the sheer numbers. I pointed out the $500 per test for the heart exam. It's just the sheer number of players is going to be a factor in that decision. It's going to cost less money to test and to do testing across the board.
Very true. All right, one last point, Sarge. You think, you would know best. Obviously, this is going to be a financial test for Pat Hobbs in a way that he couldn't imagine even before this happened. Now, there's definitely no revenue from football games. What do you think is going to happen within the athletic department?
So I'm just going to, again, I hate speculating because, as I said before, when you're talking about the money that these schools stand to lose, we're not talking about one central guy diving into a pot full of money like Scrooge McDuck. This is the money gets spread to salaries, and so I hate speculating about this, but I'm just going to quote Jonathan Holloway when he was asked about it. He said, "Look, the financial implications are real. Everybody understands that. It's too early to say what gets cut." He pointed to the state being in a really tough financial situation. Obviously Rutgers, relies on, heavily on an appropriation from the state. None of those numbers are clear yet. They probably won't be clear until the end of September. But, he did not deny the fact when he was asked about, cuts, that stuff is going to be on the table. He said, the bottom line, it's going to be tough. So, again, speculating on is tough, but, we're not just talking about athletic stuff getting cut. We're talking about stuff across the board, throughout the university.
Yeah. All right. Rutgers Insider questions. Thanks again for everyone for sticking with us during this transformational time in Rutgers history. NJ.com/text if you want to join. And if you did join, I'm going to say this. I don't know if you guys realize it who are subscribers, but Cratch had this news on the Rutgers Insider before the national guys had tweeted it out to the world. So take a bow, Cratch. People who are giving their $4.99 learned about this before anybody else on the planet. So that's pretty cool stuff. All right. Here's a good question, and I wondered about it myself. Nary a word from Greg Schiano during this process prior to the decision, and information to share regarding his seeming silence. And, Sarge, what are you hearing? Is he going to give a statement at least? I mean, Holloway's on the radio. Every coach in America has been on TV. Why is Greg not talking?
Well, so he will talk. My understanding is he will talk at some point. People are going to ask, and we'll ask him, on the record, just his thoughts on playing. And I do, not to give too much behind the scenes stuff, because I think that would be unfair, but I will say that in his public statements going back, a couple months ago, he pointed out that, there were, members of the team whose families lost loved ones. He also is from New Jersey, which he understands more than anyone, what the state has gone through. So,
right.
And now he's experienced an outbreak that started from 2 to 4 to 10 to, more than 30 cases. So he understands just how real, as we've also reported, there were symptomatic cases. And, by symptomatic, I'm talking, flu-like conditions. So he understands how serious this virus was. I think, again, we will have an opportunity to get him on the record at some point. But I think just based on what he said before and just based on, knowing the seriousness of this virus, I think we kind of have an understanding of his feelings on it.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed. I thought there was a place for him to be the counter voice to, a borderline insane Jim Harbaugh screed, and Ryan Day didn't look good on television either, insisting like Ohio State's going to leave the Big Ten. I'm sorry there, coach, but yeah, give me a break. There was a place for someone to come out and say, hey, look, we got to worry about these kids. We don't, for a coach to come out before this decision, that void was filled. I'd be interested to see what he says, when now the decision is made, if he, how strongly he comes out in support of what the Big Ten is doing. All right. Other questions we got here. So we've talked about it a little bit, but do you think if you are Pat Hobbs, money is a huge negative, will there be a bridge loan or some sort of financing from the Big Ten to make up for lost football TV revenue? That's going to happen, right, Sarge? We understand that there's going to be some kind of way the Big Ten is going to make these guys as much whole as they can.
So again, I've reported this about a month ago, the potential of this happening. I don't have anything concrete on that. The Pac-12, there has been reporting that the Pac-12 has already secured this bridge loan. Rutgers in the past has gotten it from the Big Ten, so has Maryland. Maybe not every school will, but I mean, Wisconsin, Barry Alvarez has already talked about losing $100 million. So I don't know, when you're talking about just, the down the line, the Big Ten can easily justify it by saying we have these TV contracts that are worth, $1 billion. So they should be able to secure something where they're making athletic performance as whole as possible. I'd be quite frankly, I'd be surprised if it hasn't happened already.
Right. All right. This is a good one. I like weird, random college football speculation. It's been so long since we've had conference affiliations to talk about. Weird thought / question. Let's say Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Nebraska, and Wisconsin all voted to play and are unhappy about not playing. What is preventing them from, 1, leaving together, then asking the Big Ten to welcome them back, or 2, forming their own conference and grabbing any other defectors or teams that won't? Kratch, you like this stuff. You want to take that one? What could...
So what's preventing them from leaving is that the Big Ten, it's called grant of rights.
Yes.
The Big Ten basically controls the media rights of all the member schools. And it's a contract that extends out, and it expires at some point. But for instance, the ACC, the great maneuver that the ACC made when conference expansion happened was they created a grant of rights that's like into the 2030s. And the other thing is that Notre Dame is included in the grant of rights, so Notre Dame can't join a conference unless it's the ACC for like the next 15 years. Yeah. So that's what's keeping them out. Now, that being said, I do think there's a possibility that, and we kind of are getting closer to it with each day and all the development, especially with about players' rights and unionization or a players' association, that someone and it's probably going to be driven not by geography, but by Amazon Prime or ESPN or Hulu, is going to say, why don't all the big brand name football programs get together and create their own league? I think that day could come someday where it's not just Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State leaving, but USC leaves the Pac-12, and Oklahoma and Texas leave the Big 12, and Clemson leaves the ACC, and half the SEC leaves, and now you have this like Premier League, Champions League of college football, and it's all on a streaming service, and it's all about money. I don't think that's impossible.
Yeah, I'd spend my $9.99 on that.
No, those schools are not going to leave. As we discussed, I think a lot of it was just posturing for recruits and trying to throw your weight around. Nebraska is the only team that I think would consider leaving, and if they left, there would be a line out. I mean, I don't know where the Big Ten would go, but they would have options.
All right, this is a good one, Sarge. Maybe, I don't know. You crash. I don't know if you know the answer. Does Rutgers have any two-sport athletes that a season shift would make them choose between sports? That's a great question. They've had them in the past. I mean, I can think of a couple off the top of my head. Do they have any now?
Yeah, I saw the question. I don't see any. Perhaps do. I mean, normally field hockey and lacrosse is one of those sports. They do have cross country and track and field. That doesn't really count, but
there's no baseball, football. I can't think of the kid's name now. The receiver who played both sports. I mean, there's
no. The only thing I can think of is, and this is something that we're going to talk about with eligibility and stuff, is that I would imagine there's a lot of, if there's not high school football in this country really this year, I think you're probably going to see a lot more kids who try to enroll in January, if anything, just to be able to get in the strength and conditioning program.
Right.
And Keontae Hamilton obviously is a big time. He's got wrestling. He was initially a wrestling commit. Now he's a football commit. But even if he enrolled early, I don't think it'd really impact him if there's football and wrestling season at the same time, because he's not a guy who was going to wrestle his first year. He would have redshirted in wrestling anyway, so he might just stick with the football program, or he's probably going to redshirt there too. But no, I can't think of anybody. But it's definitely something that I'm sure is going to be an issue somewhere. And maybe you're going to kind of have like a cool like Jackie Robinson type athlete that does hoops and football at the same time.
Another good one, obviously we have no idea what the roster's going to look like, but do you think that the delayed season will have any impact on the starting quarterback between Art Sikowski and Noah Vedral? I mean, I guess, are they both going to be on the roster? I mean, this kid came from Nebraska. Is he going to stick? I mean, there's so many different things that could happen here. What's going to happen with the quarterbacks? Either one of you guys, go ahead and grab that one.
Well, I will say I will break a little news here by saying they had one practice a couple weeks ago, and on that Friday before everything got shut down. My understanding, talking to various people, is Art Sikowski looked really good, and he handled the bulk of the first team snaps. Hasn't
he looked good in practice at the beginning? I mean, we've been talking about him as a practice player for 3 years.
Yeah, I think ultimately, everyone talks about the fit that Vitral would have had with the new offensive coordinator Sean Gleason. But the other thing that you're forgetting is that Sikowski came from IMG, where Jay Butler, the highly beloved, highly trusted strength and conditioning coach that Greg Schiano has a lot of faith in, came from as well. So there's a relationship there. Will have a long-term effect. I can't really answer that question. I will say that had there been a season, I would have pegged the chances of Art Sikowski being the starting quarterback a little bit higher than Crash probably would have.
Right.
I don't think it makes much of an impact, just because while I think technically Art would be NFL draft eligible now, I don't think he's obviously going to make that move, and Noah Vedral's not going anywhere. So I think you're just kind of putting the whole competition on hold.
Right. Okay. Recruiting question: where are we with the St. Joseph's guys and other potential 4 or 5-star guys we are in the mix for? And are there any guys we suspect might leave Rutgers and enter the transfer portal /graduate? So there's a 2-part one, Cratch. I mean, obviously recruiting. I think we've talked about it, but the fact that COVID has made it difficult for all of these guys to look at other campuses has been a help for Rutgers. So how is that going to impact? And then is there a fear that are there players on this Rutgers roster who are valuable enough that they could enter the transfer portal and get picked up by an ACC team if that really is, a thing that's happening in the world? What do you think?
So the St. Joe's guys, it seems like the recruiting buzz is that they're trending toward Michigan State. Now, I think the one thing Rutgers fans can kind of take solace in is that, unlike with Chris Ash, I don't think it's over if they commit to Michigan State. I think Greg his staff are going to be in it till the end, and there's always a chance for a flip.
Right.
As for guys on the roster, I mean, yes, there are good football players at Rutgers. But that being said, what are you transferring to?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I think that I understand the concern, but I also think people are kind of making a little bit too much of the idea of a kid's going to get in the transfer portal. He's going to just randomly pick a school that might not even play football by the time he actually gets his, transcripts through. So I just think that I understand it's a concern, but I would think that it's and another thing too is these schools that are still playing, they're not going to want guys they're going to want guys who can help now. And I don't know if Rutgers necessarily has all those guys that can immediately jump with no issues about eligibility and contribute immediately.
Yeah, I can think of just a couple. Really, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
All right, and this is a good one, I think. I know you guys probably don't want to get too political, but is it frustrating that the relaxed handling of the pandemic by national leadership has led to the virus still being uncontrolled? So many people are unwilling to follow simple steps of mask wearing and social distancing. I can't help but think that attitude comes from the top. I mean, again, we won't get too political, but I mean, I think we're here because of that. If this thing had been, I've had this conversation a number of times with people, if we had gotten this thing under control as a nation in the spring, like Germany, like, all of Europe, like most of the industrialized world would, well, it would absolutely be a different situation. And not just for this, by the way. We're learning today that it's unlikely that our kids are going to go to school. I mean, think of, I still can't have a hamburger without a restaurant. There's like a million things that are part of this. And yeah, I mean, I am extremely frustrated. Sarge, you want to field this one, or you want to just?
Yeah, I'll field it. So again, not to get political, I will say this: that Pat Forty, the columnist for SI.com, had a story, and and if you just want to Google President Trump and Pat Forty, you could read it. I agree with all of his points on that. Again, not getting political. I will touch on it from the other question that you asked. My last story, and you covered the health, the coronavirus from the health perspective for 4 months while we were away from sports. My last story that I wrote was pondering the question, is there going to be a second wave? I think what we're learning right now is nationwide. There's not a second. We're in the first wave. It's just one long wave. So. As far as whether or not New Jersey, which has numbers that is doing a lot better than a lot of these other states, whether or not it actually results in a so-called second wave, probably too early to tell. But if it does, we're probably have to blame the rest of the country and where other states are at this point.
Right. All right, fellas, that covers all of it. I got to tell you, and it's just it's uncertain for college football, uncertain for us, and I think people, there's been this unreal narrative that some dummies in fringes of the college and the pro and college football media put out there that, people in sports writing, wanted to see this happen. I can't think of anything like I wanted to see happen less. I legitimately look forward to arriving at the football stadium and walking through the parking lot and seeing familiar faces before a game and talking to them and going to the press box. And I know the outcomes have been terrible the last few years, but still covering a live event and talking about it and speculating what will happen next. I mean, it's why we all got into this business, and then I'll have it this fall for college football. It's going to be rough. Final thoughts? You guys want to give
same thing? I mean, I think about all the tailgates, like you said, that we go through and we're getting invited to, and it's just such a way of life. it's a way of life for us. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I asked the question to a few people. It's like, what the heck are we going to do without it? So, just a depressing day. One of the more depressing days I've had, in this business, maybe ever.
Yeah. Cratch, final thoughts?
No, I just like college football. I mean, I think that college football has been like a major part of my life since I was like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12. I'm going to be 31 in October. It's just weird. It's horrible. I mean, I think that I kind of step back. Like, even I remember in March, I was like, they canceled March Madness. And now it's like, there's not going to be Big Ten football this fall. And, look, I mean, I'll be honest with you, like, I hope the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 can find a way to play safely and get it done. But I don't know. I don't think that's likely to happen. But I mean, I certainly hope they do. I mean, I hope that there's an Army. I think it would be immensely important for national morale that there be an Army-Navy game this year. But I just don't know.
I don't know. Exactly. I'm gonna have to take the kids apple picking. That's what that means. Ugh, apple picking sucks. All right, guys. On that note, let's wrap it up. Everyone, thanks for listening. I don't know when we're going to do this again, but I'm certain we're going to do it again well before Rutgers plays a football game. Steve Politi, James Cratch, Keith Sargent signing off. Thanks for listening.
I was skeptical about ordering foundation online. I can't even find a match in stores. Then I discovered Il Maquillage. Their online quiz found my exact shade in seconds. With Try Before You Buy, you can try your full-size shade at home free for 14 days. But I was obsessed on day one. It's so lightweight and natural, it's literally my skin in a bottle. Take the quiz at ilmaquillage.com/quiz. That's ILMAKIAGE.com/quiz.